What's up YouTube? Have you ever wondered if there are benefits to doing a really long-term creative project where you work on something, say, over the course of like an entire year? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome back. My name is Ben Nielsen. I'm a media design educator and I just finished up a year-long project that I've been working on. Now what we're going to talk about today are the benefits of doing a long project like this, and I'm going to use the specifics of my project to kind of highlight it, but that doesn't mean that your project would be exactly the same as mine. My project is one that I call On the Doorstep: Liminal Moments in the Hobbit, and it was an illustration project. I'd wanted to do something with illustration for a long time because it's an area of creativity that I haven't engaged with that much, and I really wanted to do something, but I didn't know what. I wanted to do something that would be meaningful to me. So it kind of arrived that I was just doodling pictures from the Hobbit one day, and then I kind of started drawing it in Procreate, and I did sort of a finished piece of Bilbo approaching Smaug in the Lonely Mountain. And so I kind of had this piece that I was working on, and then I realized that The Hobbit, a really important book for me, would be a really good thing for me to read with my daughter. And I thought she would just be about old enough for it next year. So I chose to spend the last year, 2023, working on a picture from each chapter of The Hobbit. So this made a nice long longitudinal illustration study for me where I could be able to work on a project over the course of time and really develop my skills in a way that wouldn't require me to only be focused on one piece for an entire year, but rather one project for an entire year. And I learned so much by doing this, and I think that you could learn a lot from doing a project like this as well, something that's going to take you a really long time and help you to develop your skills. So I'm not an illustrator by training or trade, but it's always been something that I've wanted to try and experience and to do. And so this project really pushed me outside of my comfort zone and caused me to have to learn new things that I didn't really know before and develop some skills that maybe I had learned but hadn't really worked on for a while. And I think that's one of the big benefits to doing something like this. It wasn't for a client and it wasn't for commercial reasons. It was just to help me develop creatively and to be able to make something meaningful for my daughter. So let's talk about some of the benefits to this, and I'll show you some of the pictures as we go along here so that you can kind of see where I was coming from. Now, did I become an amazing illustrator in the last year? No. It wasn't like it was my whole focus for this year. I worked on just over one picture a month, so it gave me some time to do it. So you may not be blown away by these pictures, but I think that I've really developed a lot more skills in this area than I had before through doing this. So let's talk about how you set up a creative project. Well, you need to do something that's going to be meaningful to you, something that you are going to be able to stick with through for the long haul, even when it gets difficult. For me, some of these pictures were really easy. Starting with the picture of Bilbo going to Smaug was easy. I already had a sketch of that I had done, just kind of doodling, and it was something that I wanted to do. Other pictures like Bilbo coming into the spiders to save the dwarves, easy to kind of conceptualize and visualize. I knew where I wanted to go with a lot of those pictures, and I worked on those easy wins early on, things that I knew kind of where I wanted to go. But constraining myself to doing one picture from each chapter of The Hobbit really forced me to confront working in different areas. I couldn't just cherry pick the easy ones, the things that I wanted to do, because I had to do one from each chapter. And so building a challenge for yourself that will cause you to stretch. Maybe there's some easy stuff to do at the beginning, some stuff that you really want to do, but it's going to cause you to stretch by the end. That will really help your learning because it will force you to be able to learn and grow. For example, this picture of Bilbo and Thorin at the gate. It's not necessarily my best work, but it was one that I didn't really know where to go with or what to do, and so I really had to learn to do close reading of the text to figure out kind of what was happening and where I might find an important moment there that I could depict. And there's a lot of things that as you work through a project like this are going to force you into new directions. So I think it's really important to give yourself some really clear constraints so that you aren't overwhelmed by everything that you might have to do. For me, I knew that I was not a great illustrator yet and I needed to develop those skills, but I wanted to make it approachable for myself. So I knew that I could draw Bilbo from the back and that was going to be okay because that was essentially going to be a half circle and a circle for his body and his head. And so I knew that that was something achievable for me, and then I could focus in on the rest of the picture without worrying too much about my ability to actually draw the human or the hobbit shape in this case. So I knew that I would draw from the back. I knew I wanted important moments where a decision was happening. I set that as a constraint for myself where either there is a turning point in the story or Bilbo's making a decision, because I wanted to call it on the doorstep after the chapter in The Hobbit called that, and set these kind of liminal moments where a transition is happening, where a corner is being turned. So setting that out gave me a guideline. I could look through the text and figure out where I wanted to go with that. And then I set myself boundaries on the medium that I would use. I knew that I was going to draw it in Procreate because I love drawing in Procreate and it's a very approachable place for me to be able to draw. I wasn't going to try and suddenly jump into physical medium, which is something that I've only done a little bit with. I was going to stick with an app that I knew pretty well, but I knew I would have to learn some new things. And then I even constrained myself in the brushes that I would use. So I really constrained myself to mostly just using the gouache brushes from Retro Supply. I've talked about Retro Supply before and some of their brush packs that I really enjoy using. They're not a sponsor or anything. I really wanted to learn to use these gouache brushes, so I knew that committing to a long-term project with them would cause me to have to learn to use them well. And so knowing that I had these constraints, I then went into the project and was able to learn a lot by doing it. Now, depending on your project, it may not be illustration, it may be filmmaking, it may be photography, it may be any number of different creative things that you're trying to engage in for a long and sustained period of time. So you might not learn the same things that I learned, but I just want to give you some examples of the kinds of things that I was kind of forced to learn as I went through this project. First off, I wasn't able to completely avoid doing other characters in it. So there were times like this picture here where Bilbo's looking back through the crack and Gandalf is fighting the goblins. I knew that I had to engage some other figures, and I don't think that these are perfect by any means, but I used the silhouette effect so that I wouldn't have to engage too much with the actual facial figures and the actual structure of the characters. So I was able to ease myself into kind of this character work. But once I got to the point where Bilbo is giving the Arkenstone to Bard, I couldn't really avoid that moment because it's so pivotal. It's critical to kind of the whole thing. And there was no way for me to avoid having the characters of Bard and the Elven King in the frame. And so at that point, I really had to push myself to the next level in character development. I don't think I've gotten to the point where I feel really comfortable with my characters yet, but certainly I improved over the course of this project. So I took a figure drawing class on Skillshare to learn about how to structure bodies and faces, and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And are they fantastic? No, but if I did this 100 more times, they would definitely start to be getting better. And so I know that pushing myself in that direction was really important for me because it did push me outside my comfort zone, which I had originally tried to not push myself quite that far. But once I was gotten more comfortable with the basics of the drawings that I was doing, I then could push myself further. And that's what you'll find as well. As you get comfortable with the basics of the creative project, then you'll find areas where you can and maybe want to push yourself forward. Another area was perspective. I need to do some of these sweeping shots like Bilbo here on the back of the eagle coming into the Carrick, and Bilbo at the end looking back towards the Lonely Mountain from the Misty Mountains. I need to be able to do these vistas. In order to do that, I had to learn more about perspective than I knew before. I knew a little bit about perspective. I still only know just a little bit about perspective, but I needed to learn enough that I could draw these scenes and make them at least seem believable in the style that I was doing. So that was really important to learn perspective, and that caused me to learn new tools in Procreate that I hadn't really used before, such as the drawing guides for the perspective tools. And that was really helpful in being able to get to the point where I felt like I could draw something that actually made sense to me. I also learned new things about skills that I already felt that I had. So for an example of this is blend modes. I learned how to do things in Procreate that I maybe knew how to do in Photoshop but hadn't done in Procreate before. Same thing with using the effects in Procreate, the adjustments. I hadn't really done that before very much, and so I had to do that for certain things, like here where Bilbo is facing the door as that last ray of the sun comes to open up the keyhole. I had to learn to create a glow and a blur around those things, and so that was all kind of new to me, particularly doing it in Procreate. So that really pushed me in a new direction, even for something that I thought I had a fairly good understanding of. Another thing is sketching. I've talked about sketching a lot, both on this channel and in my courses. So I thought I had a pretty good handle on sketching. But sketching for design and sketching for drawing are a little bit different, as I've talked about before. Sketching for drawing was something that I had to learn more about and learn how to do. And I had to get comfortable with refining a sketch more than I had before. I always do sketches very rough so that I can get ideas out, and that's my primary purpose in sketching as a designer. But in sketching for illustration, I had to learn to do more development in my sketching phase. And so that was a really important step for me, teaching me something new about something I already thought I knew really well. Another skill that I had to develop was close reading. There were points in this project where I didn't know what to do. Sometimes I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but sometimes I just had to read through the text really closely to figure out a point where it's really important, the choice that Bilbo's making, and it's something that would work. A good example is this picture from the very first chapter, An Unexpected Party, where Bilbo is actually crossing the threshold back into the room after he's left, and it's talking about how his Took side, his adventurous side, has won out. And that moment is key to the entire book. If that didn't happen, there would be no story. And so I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't learned to do the close reading and find those moments in the text. So in summary, I think you can learn a lot by doing a longitudinal project for whatever kind of art or design you're into. Really take some time as we approach another new year to think about this, to set a goal for yourself. For me, there were 19 chapters in The Hobbit, so it was going to be more than one picture a month, but I felt that that was something that was doable, but also would stretch me and push me. I'm really proud to have achieved this, and I've put it all together in a book that I'm going to give my daughter for Christmas, and then next year we're going to read The Hobbit together. So it's something that will be special. So there was real meaning behind it. So I did feel a real need to finish it on time, and you do need something kind of pushing you forward to make sure that you actually engage with your creative project and do it, and you don't just give up partway through when things get tough and you have to learn new skills. Okay, so that's some of the things that I learned. Now I would love to hear from you. Have you engaged in a long-term creative project like this, where you were just trying to develop your skills, get better, and make something meaningful to yourself? Drop down in the comments and let me know if you've done that or you plan to do it. If you have done it, let me know what you learned, and if you're planning to do it, let me know what you hope you will learn along the way. If you are interested in learning more about Procreate, I do have a short video, Introduction to Procreate, in just 5 minutes that you can watch here on the channel. And I will have a course on Procreate brushes coming out soon on Skillshare, so stay tuned for that. Okay, we'll chat in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.